Hi, everyone. I know it's about 4:30, caffeine is not kicking in, and I'm jet lagged, so I'll try to make it as fun as possible for everyone. And I'll give you as concrete of examples as I can on some of the projects. Essentially, what we're working on is we have a social innovation startup. I'm based basically here at University of Montreal. We have a startup of about 6 people, 30 interns, some volunteers, an association as well. My background, I come from the world of communication, and I decided to not do my master in it because there's no, in terms of outcome, this is the case if you do your master in communication, it's the same revenue than if you do your bachelor. So I started to look at other options, went into management, but all those skills was quite useful. And you'll kind of see some of those exceptions here. The main thing, we started a project around COVID that deals with digital divide. Half of the world did not connect to internet in the last 3 months. And even here in Canada, the situation is not amazing. The CRTC has some very precise mapping of the situation, and half of rural Canada does not have access to basic internet speed. For context, our definition of basic internet speed will make European laughs, but it does include unlimited internet. And when you do educational activities, for example, online classes and things like that, that's definitely a case where you want unlimited internet to watch that video content. And the reality is you have places in the world where you do not have good connectivity, for example, war, the way they're located. In some cases where even if you have internet connectivity, you do not want to have it because you want to have a secure environment where you can still have the benefits of a network without the vulnerability. So we start working on a little project, and we called it Gray Box. This is a uni. What you see here is essentially, and I have a demo for those who are curious later. It's a small little Android device. We really want to make it low end. And what we do is we take a cheap, inexpensive Android device. This is like $50, and we transform it into a server. So it creates a Wi-Fi hotspot, and anybody can connect. So we can load resources like Moodle, for example. Moodle that we use in educational environment, Khan Academy that probably saved you a few times when you had to brush up on some math skills. Basically, if we can put a web server, if it's a website, sorry, we can put it in there and serve it. We're right now testing a few projects in Ukraine as well because connectivity, as you can guess, is quite a problem. We deployed in very rural areas and remote areas here in Canada during COVID. We deployed in schools where you assume that they have access to internet, but it turns out that if 20 people are trying to connect to the same spot, it dies. We recently deployed in Madagascar, for example, for mapping solutions. In their case, they have the entirety of Wikipedia. That you just need a few dollars to host the entirety of Wikipedia in French, even with pictures. So you can kind of get an idea of what we do here. And essentially what we do is we take content, we put it on that little device, and I want to talk a second about the application, because you can work on a technical solution, and there's a lot of technical solutions to put internet in a box, but they tend to fail because they assume a lot of things about the end user. We spend a lot of time around COVID and before to kind of look at, if you have a technical solution, how do you make sure that people actually use it? So in our case, what we did is we made sure that it works with what people already have in their pocket. They have a phone, so it has to work with that. We make sure that even if electricity shuts down, they can still use it. We make sure that you can deploy it in remote areas. That's not some complex piece of engineering or some sort of very fragile server, for example. So those are little constraints anytime you work on a technical project to make sure that it actually does the last step of the way. We deployed in a bunch of places. I will skip that step. And this is an example of all of those are very interesting technical projects that assumes that the end user is a technical end user. So the teacher that says, how do I add content because I'm teaching a class, the solution should never be, oh, it's super simple. Just open your terminal and type this following command. This will not work, right? And we discovered a bit too late some of those elements, but regardless of the solution is here. So this is just the context. That led us to work on some crazy other projects involving AI. The first time I had to download Wikipedia in French, I thought that I lost my connection because I downloaded Wikipedia in English a few times, right? Guess how many articles there are in English Wikipedia? About 6 million. How many of them in French? About 2 million. In Russian, a bit less than 2 million. In Ukrainian, for context, I checked the latest number from a few days ago, well, yesterday, 1.2 million. The first time I had to download a smaller of those Wikipedias, I thought I just lost internet connection because it downloaded pretty quickly, right? So it's kind of weird. We assume that we don't have that problem. And actually what happens is Wikipedia is done by communities, and there's a lot of inconsistencies across the various Wikipedias. So what we did is we looked at machine learning that is getting pretty good on content, and we say, hey, I think we're lucky. Wikipedia is a very formal way of presenting content. It's not poetry, right? ML works quite well on this. So we tried a few of those models that exist out there, and they perform really well. We have blue scores that are similar to about 80%, 85%, so similar to what you have with DeepL, Google Translate. I'm sure you use those tools. Even if you're bilingual or trilingual, they work really, really well. Actually, the issue we have right now is not using ML for translation. I think you can all agree it works pretty well by now. I'll give you an example. Did you ever have that problem of a teacher that is a bit too enthusiastic when it corrects your paper? It kind of rephrase everything and have very defined opinions about everything. Well, we don't want to have the same problem with the Wikipedia community. You cannot just say, hey, this is a better version of this article. You have to be specific. Hey, this piece of content, you don't talk about it. Or this piece of information is outdated. You don't just copy and paste the translated version and you send them, right? They don't want to hear about you ever again if you do that, right? So what we're working right now is a way to compare the content to essentially propose what is missing. So essentially right now, the difficulty too is to maintain the kind of structure of Wikipedia. Because if I submit you something, what makes Wikipedia great is the references, all those footnotes, and also the fact that there's a lot of links within it. There's ways to do that, but that's essentially what we're working on. And next month, basically, we're gonna start testing some of those automatic translation with the community. I'll give you a technical explanation of that project. I think it's so much more fun. Imagine if Wikipedia was a Git. Each language is a different repository. It's not a branch. It's a whole different repository. So imagine you join a project called Wikis, and there's too many of them. What do? You start thinking about, is there a way to kind of merge it, right? And what you do is you perform a diff. You're looking at what is the difference. But in this case, you have to do a semantic diff, right? Because people might frame and say things differently. This is the current distribution of Wikipedias. Now, the interesting thing is you're essentially talking about merging the world's knowledge. And the part that interests me as somebody who studies in bioethics, especially the public health concern and the ethical sides behind it, is how do you identify bias? And how do you identify conflicting information? Because in theory, with objective knowledge, fine, you might have a different version of a specific fact, but at least can we present both versions, let's say in a historical case? Why one is, basically you can allow quickly spot those differences and start very meaningful discussion within the Wikipedia community. Of course, open source project. If anyone is crazy enough to contribute on that, that's pretty much where we're at. This is a little example of that comparison tool. Anecdotally, it will be a kick-ass tool for teachers who want to see if their students are cheating. Right now, what we discovered, because we kind of tried a lot of those tools to do comparison, is that if you give a homework where you just translate between 3 languages and give it back to the teacher, you're good. He's not going to spot it. A lot of tools break down quickly when you're trying to get this. So you do really need to have semantic. And look, for example, just on the first part, the Barack Obama, it's not. So this is so basically one of them has been translated and the other one is language of reference. And you can still spot similarities, even if it's said in drastically different ways. So this is our little projects on Wikipedia. We're working quickly on another project called Project Codex. When I was in Poland, there was a crisis center for all the help from Poland, from Europe, that is going to Ukraine. And one of the regular needs we had was medical care. And you'll be surprised by the amount of medical lists that you will see going through WhatsApp, right? This is not perfectly formatted. This is the inventory list I need with, clearly quantified items. It's a WhatsApp list. And people are using either medical terms, scientific terms for molecules, or they will use, when you have a headache, you take an aspirin or an Advil. You're not necessarily going to use the chemical in the way you say it. Imagine now people know what product to buy for themselves, but they don't know the exact molecule of it. So how do you request help from another country that have other brands, for example? So what we start mapping is we took a bunch of that information we found in the field, and we start compiling a lot of sources. By the way, Wikidata is amazing. It has a lot of data you can use to join databases like, for example, World Health Organization. So if we're talking about aspirin, you can know the molecule, you can know how aspirin is sold everywhere around the world, what is the actual local brands that they use, and etc. And this is key if you're trying to unlock help from international communities. A lot of the issue we heard in those channels is, hey, we need help. Cool. What do you need? What do you have? This kind of chicken and egg problem. So the idea is to say, if all I have is a phone, again, this obsession of being very accessible. If all I have is a phone and I have a list of need that is phrased based on the terms that I know around me, can I copy and paste them somewhere and have it translated into something that will be meaningful to an organization in another part of the world that has different terms for the same things. So this is a project, again, open source. Our goal right now is to also re-inject in those databases. There's a lot of holes that we can fill by doing those joins. So that's a project called essentially Codex. And the idea is to output it in two ways. A simple Google Sheet that the organization could use as they want, right? Something on Notion, for example, that is very mobile friendly, and also just a web app that you can copy and paste that list and have it translated in the localized with the percentage of accuracy, right? But we really wanted to have both versions because maybe just an Excel sheet is good enough for most cases. You don't need to overcomplicate, and also you want to make sure that even if the project has issues, even if the web client is not working, that they at least have something that they can use. I will skip really quickly that, but often we also work on another project which is just to scrape websites, because we often have that when we work with people on the ground. They want to have an offline access to a website and internet shuts off. So how do you make sure you have access? So essentially a little scraper for those who are crazy enough to work on that. So that's another project, again, to make sure that when we teach classes, for example, as a teacher, you can put your curriculum with all the links that you have in your bio, and it will scrape all those sites. Those who are old enough remember that we used to have web scrapers, but that was HTML4, that was some older codes. None of them kind of survived. So we were working on a project to kind of remodernize that. And last project that we worked, not AI, this one as well, is essentially a mesh networking. So when there's no network, how do you make sure that Android devices can connect with each other to be able to exchange medical information, educational content and such, even if the main network is dead? Your phone is pretty much powerful enough to act as a server. It has enough of ways to connect to other devices. We're essentially working on this. So mesh networking. So if you have ideas of projects, if you have skills that could be useful for those projects, it's fantastic. We're in talk with people in the ground that are in Ukraine that have educational needs, that struggle with connectivity, that struggle with some language barriers and such. If we can help, I think it's the least we can do. It's useful for Ukraine. It's useful for other parts of the world. Thank you.
Very much, Valentin. I don't know if somebody has any question.
Yeah, so I actually have two questions. The first one is, how much do these gray boxes cost in the end? Like, is it affordable for people also like with a different socioeconomic background than we have, for example?
So we're aiming at a cost of around $100. And essentially it comes from the fact that we have a lot of interns that we're able to work on the code and etc. As an organization, you always have to offset your costs. But the goal is to have it within $100 to $200 at most. And compared to a lot of technical solutions out there, it's not a membership. It's not something that you have to pay for a month. So it makes it also viable for international organizations to buy it once and make sure that it will still be operational in a few years. even when the budget runs out, because budget will run out, and you need solutions that are resilient to that.
Perfect, thank you. And the second question I have is about this idea, okay, we have Wikipedias in different languages, let's merge it together. And I have one concern about this, and this is that, as you mentioned, there is like we have more Wikipedias, like more information, for example, in English, and I think in general for the Western world. So if we merge all of this together, I fear that that we lose something, because like this westernized knowledge part is also having an influence and is then dominating also the Wikipedias from other countries. And I really see that, like, if you read in Wikipedia article in different languages, there is a difference. Yeah, so I just wanted to know.
It's a very valid concern. I have a list of concerns like that worries me, and that's important to deploy. I think overall it's a balancing act. Right now we're protected because we have silos, which is not ideal solution. The good news is that it's a communication. You don't update something on Wikipedia, it goes through the community. So in our case, we're not adding content. That is not our goal. It's a bit more if I ask you to write a letter of recommendation and I send you a template. That gets the conversation started faster. So our goal is to submit suggestions to the Wikipedia community. And I'll give you a simple example. Right now, everybody here is familiar with hackathons. There are hackathons happening in Africa, for example, to translate Wikipedia. People like us meet on weekends everywhere in Africa to translate Wikipedia. And if we take content from English and we translate it to French, suddenly we have all the West Africa that speaks French and another language, let's say Veo, Swahili, or something like that, and they will translate it. And the project is named Symmetry because the idea is to go both ways. Suddenly you have a piece of information that is available in Swahili, that can go in French, that can go in English, and that can go in other sides. So it's an increasing level of complexity, but that's the aim.
But it's unbalanced, right?
So yeah, by design, it creates that. Yeah, so it's a concern.
Thank you very much for explaining.
Thank you for your questions.
Thanks, Valentin. I really like the idea of everything related to Wikipedia, like using language models. There are so many like things you can do, comparing the content of different articles, trying to correct. Of course, there are like risks. A lot of bias. You're enforcing this Western kind of view on the world because most of articles are in English. So yeah, but I find this idea is really great. My question is, however, different, and it's a bit stupid question. The second most popular language on Wikipedia, what is that? I've never heard about that one.
Okay, that's a whole wormhole if you ever get into it. I can answer it, but it's kind of complicated. It's way more articles than you ever thought would be possible. Check it out. It's a project that automated in some ways. It solved a very good issue, a very huge issue, related to a bit of biology. I'm not saying more of it. Take a look. Yeah.
Mysterious.
Thank you.
Thank